Hello, everyone. Today on edX Live, we are joined by someone who has spent over 3 decades listening to human stories across clinics, classrooms, corporate boardrooms, and communities. A counseling psychologist, corporate consultant, adoption counselor, and mental health advocate, she believes that psychological well being is not just about healing, but about empowerment. Joining us is Dr. Saras Bhaskar, counseling psychologist and corporate consultant.
Hi, ma'am. Welcome to edX Live.
Thank you. I'm glad to be a part of this podcast today.
It's wonderful having you here, ma'am. Let's dive into questions. So, you've worked across clinics, campuses, corporates, and communities for over 3 decades. When you look at young people today, what has fundamentally changed about their emotional struggles and what has not?
Very good question, because first I want to address the ones that has changed and then probably talk about what hasn't changed. What has changed is, unlike earlier, there is this constant visibility and comparison among youngsters, not just by peers or parents, but also by algorithms. So, mistakes, awkward faces, and any pain that youngsters go through doesn't disappear anymore because there is a constant reminder. This creates a persistent background anxiety. Am I up to the standards? Am I meeting people's expectations? Am I worthy enough? There is a lot of this anxiety that has escalated. Not that it wasn't there before, but now it is all the more. The second is being in the fast track world that we are in the last 25 years. Speed and saturation happens faster. Emotions hits home faster and it keeps stacking. There's no time to process those emotions because it's like, a missile coming one after the other. So we tend to kind of bury it, hoping we will address it later, but there is no time for that. So there is not much of thinking that is involved, and there is less time for boredom, more time for adrenaline rush, where a lot of emotions are not being processed. Then, the language without relief. What happens these days is youngsters going through the onlines and AI, they tend to be language savvy about the mental wellness. But there's no use in being aware about OCD, schizophrenia, paranoia. No use in just knowing the labels, but this also creates more anxiety because they are doing this introspection. Do I have it? Without seeking professional help. So these are the anxiety, the external pressures, and the unstable future. They are baked into the daily decision that we don't have time to process currently. Now, what hasn't changed? What I talked about, the anxiety, the core fears. Do I meet my parents' expectations? Do I meet my boss's expectations? Am I being in par with my peers when it comes to my vocation? The emotional intensity is loud now because they are able to express better. From the colonization generation that we grew up with, now it is like speaking up and speaking out has become to denormalize the colonial approach. So what it has done is hormones, identity formation, social stakes still amplify everything, both joy and despair alike.
So, ma'am, on the same lines, what do most people misunderstand about mental health when they look at it only as a personal weakness or a medical issue?
See what happens. The only reason I believe in biopsychosocial model is this individual has both family constellation and social constellation, a sense of belongingness, to be accepted, to be embraced, and they want it reciprocal. And we are all social animals in that sense. Now, If mental health is seen either as a personal weakness or medical issue, both views flatten something that is inherently interactive. What I mean by that is mental health isn't something that you are, it is something that happens at the intersection of the person and the world around them. So people assume you should be able to push through. Other people have it worse, so you count your blessings. If you just tried harder, you would be fine. But what this ignores is biology, our nervous system sets the thresholds, mind and body connection. When the mind is agitated, it shows up in the heartbeat, in the rising of the blood pressure. So, the chronic stress, trauma, discrimination, isolation change how the brain and the body function. So, willpower does not just regulate cortisol, sleep cycle, and threat responses. So, people should not assume it is a medical imbalance or personal weakness. It is biology that shapes vulnerability and capacity. Psychology shapes interpretation, information processing, coping, and cognitively understanding. And the third one is the social context, the exposure, the support, the reciprocity. So you cannot fix one layer of this individual without touching upon the biopsychosocial context.
That's nicely said, ma'am. Ma'am, you often speak about psychological immunity, right? In a world that constantly feel uncertain, how can student and young professionals build emotional resilience without becoming emotionally numb?
This is a very carefully crafted question, and I want to answer this carefully. As I said earlier, there is this persistent existing anxiety in individuals, and what it does is sometimes it shuts down the emotions. And what I mean by psychological immunity is not shutting the feelings down. It is about being to able to feel without being flooded. And that requires processing every day, every situation. So, how students and young professionals can build this kind of resilience is to strengthen the nervous system and not just the mindset. Attitude is not going to adjust because regulating the nervous system aligns with the psychological immunity. So, resilient isn't just staying positive and not looking at the negatives. Yes, ability to move emotions between positives and negatives. Last but not the least, choose connection over performance. What I mean by that is many young adults feel that they have to be impressive to be accepted, but that can be exhausting. That can be isolating also. So, resilience grows in a space where youngsters begin to say, I am not okay without explaining it away. It's okay to be not normal. Relationship aren't transactional. It needs to be transformational. Only then resilience grows. Vulnerability isn't treated as oversharing or weakness, but it depends on who you share with and whether that relationship is going to be growth oriented or deep growth oriented.
So, ma'am, you have worked with over 350 organizations, from MNCs to government institutions. From your experience, what is the biggest gap between how companies talk about mental well being and how they actually practice it?
Oh, Chetan, it's not just one gap, there are many. The companies talk about mental well-being as if it is an individual's responsibility. But one of the reasons I moved away from my private practice to the training part is rather than confiding my knowledge, experience, and exposure into a single individual or a single family within four walls, I chose to do it with a group of individuals where I know at least if I have 50 people, at least 5 of them would be able to absorb what I'm saying, and so they'll be able to evolve. So the moving off from private practice to the corporate structure is more, I look at it as expansion, expanding my horizon. And companies talk about take care of yourself. We encourage work life balance, use our wellness resources, speak up if you're struggling. But at the same time, what do? Reward overwork with promotional chances and praise, or even, out of the country visits for projects. Normalizing the urgency, measuring value through output while ignoring the employee's emotional load, treating burnout as an individual's failure rather than an organization's flaw. You see how it can be counterproductive? I would want the organizations to take that accountability that in order for my employees to peak in their productivity, they need to be given the support, not emphasized, I want it yesterday attitude, to train the managers on that. And also ask people not to bring the whole selves to work while ignoring their competency and capability.
Ma'am, you often said that active and objective listening is most important skill for a counselor, right? Why do you think listening something that sounds so simple is actually becoming rarer today?
Absolutely, because what I notice these days is people want quick responses. So you begin to process even before the sender finishes the sentences how you need to respond or react. So, what it means is we are rewarded for responding, but not for listening. So, when you take some time to listen and respond, you are called slow part. You process information slowly. You are not quick. So it is judgmental statement. So what happens is people are always on the edge wanting to respond and not listen to reply. So attention has been fragmented, not just shortened. So I believe in this profession that I am in, true listening is sustained focus. Tolerance for silence. I can't expect you to be saying mm-hmm, uh-huh, yes, no all the time. As long as we both are in alignment, I need to be able to tolerate your silence. And the ability to track the emotional subtext based on the nonverbal cues I receive from you if it's an in-person session. So, whether it is a corporate or in counseling session, I feel that focus, silence, and nonverbal cues are very important for objective listening.
Ma'am, we see a lot of transition in your career from direct client care to monitoring and leading corporate counseling. So, what made you take that step? And what legacy do you hope your work leaves behind?
Legacy is an important component in my life, and the one of the reasons, as I said earlier, the reason I moved from the private counseling practice to the corporate environment is to bring about positive changes in the lives of more people for the same time I spend with an individual or a family. If I do a training for a 90-minute or a half a day training or a 1 day workshop, I am catering to about 200, 300, or 500 people, where I believe at least 5% of them would benefit with some learning. If not anything, at least it stays in their head and pops out when situation arises. So I feel I would reap the fruit of my labor with larger audience. And what would I like to leave as a legacy is for the counselors, therapists, to trust their judgment and not confuse compassion with self erasure. Sometimes we confuse empathy and compassion as professionals. At workplace, that stops treating mental health as a damage control and start treating it as a design or a mandatory process for increased productivity, decreased recidivism, retention. Leaders need to understand that psychological safety isn't softness, but it is in infrastructure. These are the legacies I would want to leave behind.
Ma'am, with this question, I'm going little offbit. So, adoption counseling is a space you have shaped both professionally and personally. What are the most common fears adoptive parents carry but rarely say it out loud?
No, I'm glad you're bringing it, need not be all the time with youngsters or corporate. Even this adoption is something current generation is very eager to imbibe into their life. Even if they can conceive naturally and bring a child into this world, for the social cause, youngsters are open to doing adoption. And yes, adoption counseling services is so close to my heart because as parents, we often wonder when we adopt a child. By the way, I am an adoptive parent myself. 36 years ago, my life got changed due to the fact that adoption took place in my life. And what I have noticed both in my personal life and in the professional services that I offer for adopted parents, is this love enough or isn't it enough? Am I giving enough love? And the next question, the fears that they have is, what if my child never really feels that I am the parent? Especially if the child knows. See, in our country, we have closed adoption. The parental identity is unknown. The child becomes a custody of the state. And so placement is made by the state. So what happens is anonymity causes a lot more anxieties for the parents. What kind of genes? What kind of personalities that the child is going to bring in? Will I be able to work with? Is there any DNA issue with regards to medical condition? Although when we do the checkup before the placement, everything at that moment is perfect, still we don't know the genetic dispositions. So there is that fear. There is also a fear about others who is constantly observing you to know that if you're doing the right thing, if the child succeeds, that happens even in birth families. If the child succeeds, parents have done a good job. If the child doesn't succeed, parents have done a bad job. So that burden is all the more for the adoptive parents.
Ma'am, my final question is, if there's one emotional skill you believe every student should learn before entering adulthood, what would it be and why?
Psychological immunity, it is not shutting down emotion, it is building resilience.
That's a wonderful skill every student must carry. Ma'am, thank you very much for having here. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thanks for your time.
Mental health is not about fixing what's broken. It's about understanding what it means to be human. From classrooms to boardrooms, families to institutions, Dr. Saras Bhaskar reminds us that listening, empathy, and awareness can transform lives. And thank you for listening. This is edX Live, where conversations shape the future.